Alright, how's it going, everybody? My name is Philip, and today we're going to be reacting to 10 biggest differences between the US and New Zealand. I've been learning a lot of like Australian, or I've been watching a lot of Australian and New Zealand teams, sports teams, you know, with the AFL in Port Adelaide, and obviously the Auckland Blues. And I honestly have been giving serious thought to moving to one or the other. Granted, I would need to look into visas and all that, and I don't know if there's one for more than just 3 years or whatnot, but I've been, like I said, I've been giving serious thought, and I've been trying to convince other people around me as well, so that I at least know someone as I go over there, so that it could be a fun adventure. But so far, no one's biting yet. Yet. I don't know how persuasive I am, actually, now that I think about it. But I'm interested to see what the 10 biggest differences are. Obviously, I literally just did the Geography Now video on New Zealand. And I do have to say, the lingo, if that was true... if that was true, then obviously that's going to be a massive one, because yeah, go watch that one. I'll leave it up in the little dot eye thingy up in the top left corner. But I'm interested to see what the actual differences are. I'm sure obviously this is more of an island. The way I see it is it's more of an island life, kind of more like Hawaii. In the sense of, you know, a lot of people are outdoors, and from what I've learned from different countries is that you definitely have it better. I've learned that, but also I think that the way of life is just completely different. So obviously we're gonna get into it, and I'm excited. So let's check it out.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Alexander Ailing, and in today's video, I'm going to be sitting down with you and comparing the biggest differences between the United States of America and New Zealand. Now, I'm a dual citizen of both countries. I'm currently living in New Zealand. I've lived most of...
Sorry, I made that face because it just caught me off guard. I was like, why the sheep thing? But I did hear that in the last video they said it was like, what? There's more sheep than humans, like 7 to 1 or something like that. But like I said, it just caught me off guard. So yeah, that's it.
My life in the United States, and these are going to be some of the biggest differences between the two countries. I also want to say a huge thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Let's get into it. Also, just a reminder, make sure you stick around until the end, because I'm going to be starting this video off with bigger general differences, and then I'm going to be bringing it towards the more specific niche differences. So Stay tuned. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. So check it out. In January of 2021, I moved with my wife here to New Zealand. We brought our dog. It's been an incredible move. It's been a crazy one, and along the way, we've noticed a lot of differences between these two countries. But before we get into these differences that I've noticed, I think it's really important to share some general information. First off, the United States of America is much, much bigger than New Zealand. The United States currently has a population of around 333 million people, while New Zealand has just 5 million people. So while there are a lot of cultural differences that I've observed, many of the differences really boil down to those two factors: size of geography and size of population. New Zealand is around the size of the state of Oregon, which is about 2.5% of the whole landmass of the United States of America. So New Zealand is about 2.5% the size of the United States of America. That being said, New Zealand is an incredibly diverse country. It's made up of two main islands, the North and the South Island, with Stewart Island down way south and a couple of other outlying islands that make up New Zealand's territorial boundaries. While this video is about the differences between the countries, it's also worth mentioning some of the similarities. Both countries were founded by the British back in the day as colonies of the British Empire. Both countries speak English as the main language, although there are differences in accents as well as word choices, and we'll get into some of those later. So while I could make an entire video about the similarities between the two countries, this video is about the differences. So let's get started. Number 1, New Zealand and the United States of America are on opposite sides of the Pacific Ocean in different hemispheres. The United States of America is located in the northern hemisphere, while New Zealand is located in the southern hemisphere. New Zealand straddles the 38th parallel of latitude and generally has a nice climate. The North Island, on average, has a somewhat drier, sunnier climate, while the South Island has a somewhat cooler, wetter climate. California, which straddles the 38th parallel of latitude in the northern hemisphere, it's the opposite. Southern California has the drier, warmer climate, while Northern California has the wetter, cooler climate. Because the two countries are located in different hemispheres, they have different seasons at different times of year. For example, in Christmas in New Zealand, it's the middle of summer. They don't have snow on the ground and a white Christmas. Instead, they celebrate Christmas on the beach. And right now, it's the middle of August, but yesterday it snowed, so we're in the heart of winter.
Yeah, it's actually kind of cool.
Helicopters. They still fly on both sides of the hemisphere. Number 2, New Zealand is simultaneously in the future and in the past. Let me explain. New Zealand's time zone straddles the international dateline. So if you're living in New Zealand, you're technically living in the future. In fact, it's one of the first places for the sunrise each new day anywhere in the world. So if you're living in New Zealand, you're technically living in the future compared to the United States. New Zealand is almost a day ahead of the United States, but it works out like it's almost a couple of hours behind. So while we're technically living in the future down here, depending on where you live, it might feel like you're living in the past. Many of New Zealand's small rural towns do kind of feel like time traveling 20, 30, 40 years into the past. The next major difference is a big one. Here in New Zealand, people don't order online and ship things to their house as often as they do in the United States. Living in Los Angeles, especially during the pandemic, it became totally normalized to just shop everything you need online, and for many cases, those products would arrive on the same day, but they would be boxed up in cardboard with plastic, and it just created a lot of waste. Sure, you can order online and you can get things shipped to your house. It's probably not going to be on the same day, especially if you're not living in the major cities like Auckland, Wellington, or Christchurch, but you can do that. But people just don't do it as often. And obviously, if you're living in a city, a lot of these services are available, but for most of the country living rurally, it's not as common. And to be honest, I kind of enjoy the fact that it's not like that here. I think that the culture of convenience in the United States has gotten completely out of hand. We just expect things to arrive at your front door. Like you don't even have to change out of your pajamas if you don't want to. Now, while that's great from time to time, it becoming normalized and the new normal does not really help with the problem of waste creation, trash, etc.
One thing I'll say is it really doesn't help, like I said, with patience. I've noticed that, working where I work, there's literally no patience. Like, a lady literally complained about me because I was like, I'm asking her, I was like, I could wash my hands again if you'd like. And so I went and washed my hands. As I came back, she's already gone. And then, I get what she asked for, and then I put it up on top of the counter. And as I see her coming back, she came back with one of the managers, and she went to complain about me. I'm just like, I did what you asked. Like, you just have to be a little patient. Because, what, you want me to wash my hands, like rinse my hands? Like, quickly rinse my hands? Like 5 seconds, not even. Dry it, and then come back and help you? Because that's not really washing your hands. Especially in... I'm going to say that we're more in towards the end of the pandemic, you know, because a lot of places are still more open than they have been in a long time, in the last couple years. So, you know, I'm still trying to make sure I do my part to make sure that you don't get sick, right? So I'm doing the whole 20-second. Maybe I'll do it a little bit longer, soap and water and everything. I don't know. It pisses me off when they literally just have no patience. It frustrates the hell out of me.
One of the main differences that I've noticed living here is that my household creates much less trash. Which brings me to my next point. New Zealand is cleaner than the United States. And I think that can be boiled down to a couple of different reasons. First and foremost, like we said, New Zealand is 2.5% the size of the United States. So there are much less people here creating much less trash.
Yeah, I would also, sorry I'm pausing it so much, but I feel like here in the U.S., I remember at least growing up, a lot of people, you know, a lot of the kids that I grew up with, a lot of times, it's terrible and it needs to change. And I think it's starting to change slowly. But I remember there was this literally one conversation where it's like, do you litter? And it's like, yeah, no, I occasionally drop things. Like, okay, good. Like that was the mindset of the time. But like, I always like, if it was something small, I wouldn't throw like big old plastic bags or anything. Like I've stopped after like 8th grade. So like as soon as I started high school, I kind of just like, okay, I'll just hold on to it, throw it in the trash. But it's just driving down the freeway or driving down a highway or something. A lot of the times you'll see little plastic bags. You'll see crap all over the fucking street. And it's just like, it's disgusting. And yeah, I do live in somewhat of a city. It's not as big as San Francisco, but it's close. But, you know, it's disgusting.
But I also think that there is a culturally ingrained sense of duty and obligation to clean up after yourself. There are little signs across the country that say, like, be a tidy Kiwi. And that means clean up after yourself. Don't litter. I think that litter bugs here are really looked down upon, and there's a lot of social pressure to not litter and to clean up after yourself. But also, I think it goes further than that. As a family of 2 with a dog, in the United States, when everything was just arriving via, you know, ordering online, shipped to your house, big box, full of plastic, full of styrofoam, so much more waste was created living like that. But living here, we create literally 2 small trash bags full of trash, which go into a larger bag, which you have to pay. It costs about $5 for a roll of like 10 bags. And those are the only bags that the trash collector will accept. So there's a kind of pay to play element to it, which encourages you to create less waste. And the recycling bin here is so small. It's smaller than a cooler. And it's more than enough space for a week's worth of recycling. Which leads me to my next point. New Zealand is conservation minded. New Zealand is an island chain that exists in the South Pacific Ocean, and it's the remainder of an ancient continent called Zealandia, most of which is now underwater. And that's because the type of flora and fauna that existed in Zealandia was very unique. And New Zealand has an extremely unique ecosystem with animal species and plant species that don't exist anywhere else on Earth. That's because New Zealand was geographically isolated for millions of years. One of the biggest differences between the United States and New Zealand is that here in New Zealand, there are almost no indigenous mammal species, which allowed for New Zealand to develop a huge array of very unique bird species that just don't exist anywhere else, like the national bird, the kiwi. Many of these birds evolved to be flightless because they didn't have the need to fly away from land-based predators.
So one thing that I will say about this, the kiwis, from what I saw in the last video with the moa, the kiwis look like a miniaturized version of a moa, and the moas obviously went extinct, millennia back, centuries back, whatever, however you want to, you know. But I don't know. It's how people want us to talk about evolution and whatnot. This is like a different form, I guess. Maybe not, but it's just because the way they looked, they kind of reminded me similar to a kiwi. Maybe there's obviously little slight differences. It just they look very similar and they're flightless, and yeah, but they're so cute.
With the first humans arriving, there came pests like rats, stoats, and possums. Not the crazy looking possums from the United States, but these cute furry looking possums from Australia, which are actually wreaking havoc on the native bird species. So because many of these flightless birds are now threatened with extinction due to the importation of these predatory mammals, the whole country is quite conservation minded, and they're taking huge efforts to eliminate predators and reintroduce these flightless birds to try to revitalize and regrow these populations of unique bird species. And while many people in America share this sentiment of wanting to conserve and protect our national parks and national forests, as well as endangered species, I think that here in New Zealand, it's just much more mainstream and accepted. Whereas sometimes in the United States, that sentiment has become controversial, unfortunately. Now, moving on to some of the more interesting situations that we've encountered with differences. Restaurant culture. It's totally different. First off, it's not customary to tip your waiter in New Zealand, whereas in the United States, waiters and waitresses work for tips, and I think that kind of encourages them to be more proactive, but it also encourages restaurateurs to kind of rush you through a meal to get you out, to get another person in so that they can feed another person, maybe get another tip. But I'll share with you a funny story that happened when my wife and I first moved here and met up with my cousin and her husband who live in Auckland. We took them out for dinner. I wanted to make sure that there was no awkward moment at the end of the meal where waiter or waitress came and hit us with the bill and then people were looking at each other like, who's gonna pay? I just wanted to handle the bill and make sure that I was the person paying for it. So when we arrived and the waiter and waitress seated us, I explained that we were here, we had a reservation, she sat us down, and I told her, hey, before we get started, can you just take my credit card and hold on to this so when it comes time to pay for the meal, I can pay and, you know, my cousin and her husband can be our guests. She was dumbfounded. She looked at me so confused.
Yeah, I would never give someone my credit card like that, though.
I don't think she had ever encountered that situation ever before. And she actually had to go over to her manager and speak with her manager, who then came over and told me that they were actually not able to take my credit card before it was time to pay. So I was really confused. This was like a nice, popular restaurant in Auckland, and I don't know if that's the case in every other place, but it really kind of set a new understanding about restaurant culture here in New Zealand for me.
That's the thing, though. I don't think I've never met anyone that would just willingly say, hey, hold on to my credit card and I'll pay once, you know, everything's done with. I don't think anyone's going to be like, yo, just hold on to my credit card. Anyone that I know personally would not do that. My parents would not do that. Anyone that, like friends, family, not going to do that. Ever. So I would be a bit dumbfounded as well. Honestly, if I was the waiter or you know, I'd be like, you're being very okay with just handing someone your credit card. You're not afraid of fraud or anything like that? Like them stealing money off your card?
I did end up covering the bill, but I had to get up and pretend I was going to the bathroom right as we finished and then walk over to the checkout and pay for the bill there. And that's another difference between restaurants in the US and in New Zealand. Here in New Zealand, you don't have to do the whole awkward getting the attention of the waiter or waitress. Like, you can get up from the table, walk over to essentially where the hostess is, and just pay for your bill on the computer right there, and then it's time for you to say goodbye. Next up, a major difference, driving. Here in New Zealand, we drive on the left-hand side of the road, and the driver's seat is on the right-hand side of the car, which is the opposite of in the United States. In the USA, you drive on the right-hand side of the road, and the driver's seat is on the left-hand side of the car. And when you signal with your turn signal, those are switched too. So when you first come here and you're driving on the left-hand side of the road, chances are you're gonna hit your windshield wipers instead of the turn signal. So it's worth trying to figure that out. Another thing that's super popular here on the roads, but not as prevalent in the United States, are roundabouts. I mean, they do have stoplights here, especially in the cities, but once you get out of the cities, the whole country is pretty much a series of roundabouts. And I think that American drivers can kind of get a little bit like scared of roundabouts for some reason. It's pretty straightforward, you know? You just make sure that nobody's coming into it. And if they are, you slow down, you let them go, and then it's your turn. It's kind of nice too if you accidentally make the wrong turn on the roundabout, you just keep driving around. You can just keep going around in circles and circles. Oh yeah, and 8-lane freeways like in the United States, they don't really exist in most of New Zealand. I mean, obviously in Auckland, where 1/4 of the entire country's population lives,
I would think
they
so in
have
cities,
bigger freeways there, and there's still traffic there. The main highway in the country, State Highway 1, is for the most part a winding 1-lane road. So Google Maps might tell you it's going to take you 2.5 hours to get somewhere. It usually takes a little bit longer because the roads are quite windy. And there are actually quite a lot of crashes, especially on weekends. People drive crazy because there are, less police. There are less people on the roads, so sometimes people tend to speed. Okay, friends, last major difference. Okay. To call the police in the United States, you dial 911.
I figure it's different.
To call the police in New Zealand, you dial 111. But you can also dial 911 and it'll forward you to 111. Okay, friends, that's it for this episode of cultural differences between the United States and New Zealand.
Okay, let me know of some other differences that anyone else has noticed. I think some of them I kind of figured, because I know that, I don't know what the number is in England, but I know it's definitely not 911. I don't know, is it like 999 or something, or is that just something completely different? The getting up to pay a check, I know that there are some places that you might have to get up and pay a check, or if you're just trying to avoid that awkwardness, you can get up and ask for the check or pay. But a lot of places nowadays also has that little machine type of kiosk or something that you could just swipe right there and pay right there, and it has all your information on right there, and say, oh yeah, no, that's what we ordered. And if it's not, then you press the little button, lights up, and it shows the waiter or waitress that, hey, well, we need help. And they could come check it, and you could pay right, and then they'll fix the bill and be like, oh, nope, this is the bill right here. And it's something quick and simple. There are some other places that you do sit and wait until someone comes and helps you. But I feel like I would know some of this. The trash bag one was actually very interesting. I feel like here in the U.S. we do tend to buy a lot because it's so simple and so easy and so convenient. And I figure that there's not like a big ass Amazon plant somewhere in New Zealand or something. And so I would assume that it would take a couple days. And then if you really want something that bad, then you just go out and get it now. Obviously, if it's not on DoorDash or... Does New Zealand have like a form of DoorDash or Postmates? I would think that they might, especially in the bigger cities, but I guess in the more rural areas, probably not. But again, when he mentioned the small little cooler-sized recycling bins, I remember when I was really little, we used to have cooler sized recycling bins, and I think people normally would have like two of them. So if you filled one up, then you had that extra one. We have since been replaced with a big ass, almost garbage can. It's almost like a 5 foot one, maybe not even, maybe probably less. But it's actually, like I said, it's actually interesting that you have to pay for the garbage bags specifically so that they can come pick it up. That's actually kind of interesting. I like it in the sense of makes people need to stop using as much trash. I don't feel like a lot of people here would like that because we just have a designated garbage bin in which you just roll that out to the curb and, trash men come up and pick it up. Simple. You don't have to worry about certain trash. You don't have to worry about this and that. You just gotta, separate the recycling, the organic material, like if you cut your grass or other food related stuff, you throw that in a green bin, and then you have your regular trash. So there's 3 different bins that you just can roll out to the side, and you don't have to worry about a specific trash bag, which I do like. But if you are trying to tell people we need you to use less garbage, that is definitely a good way to do it. Especially a 10-bag system. That's okay. That was very interesting. I like it to an extent. But yeah, it's definitely quite interesting. So thank you guys so much for watching. I should probably do 10 differences. I should probably do more of these videos in different for different countries, like differences between here and Australia, differences between here and the UK, here and Spain, Germany, Austria, just random countries, because it's definitely really interesting to see the differences. Because I learned a little bit of differences that are how other countries are so much better than the U.S., but other little differences, such as like I said, the trash bag thing, that was definitely interesting and quite different. So thank you guys so much for watching, and subscribe for more content just like this, and I'll see you guys next time.